Welcome to episode 4 of Pitch Black Beacon. And today we are going to be talking about discipline versus defeat. Last week we talked about the fear and love spectrum and identifying the difference between the two and encouraging people to go out of the fear spectrum and into the love spectrum. So we thought a nice transition for the next episode would be talking about the discipline and defeat that you might feel as you're in that state of transition and working towards healthier mindsets and positive growth. So one of the biggest things is recognizing what areas need to change and gaining that self-awareness in those areas. It can be super challenging. I know it was for me at times because I lived a lot of my life in a victim mindset, and to be able to turn that mirror around and look at myself and realize that there was a lot of things that I was needing to change, and the things that I was complaining about in my life were really just projections that I needed to work on was very challenging to accept. Some of the things, not all of them. Some things I were definitely wanting to grow because I knew I had like laziness about them, but other things were, much harder pills to swallow in recognizing that there was that need for change. And starting with, okay, what do I typically say to people that I'm complaining about or that I'm unhappy about, or maybe it's a quality in somebody else that I am close with that I maybe don't like? Because if there's a quality in somebody else that I don't like, it's probably because it's something about myself I don't like. And so I had to just start sitting down and being honest with myself that, I'm not perfect and that there's things that I need to work on and change too. And when I did, it was super overwhelming because I was like, man, where do I even start? Am I even a good person? How do I change this now? Is it too late? Like, I was so overwhelmed. And it was really, really hard. But, just picking the things that were tangible and the most immediate or the most problematic or the most, pertinent to my daily life was a great starting point. And I remember one time talking to a therapist actually, and I had this long list of things that I needed to do for myself to change or accomplish or have completed to feel like I was enough, that I did all the things, that I would finally be happy if this list was done. And it was like 3 pages long, single spaced. And she was like, "What happens if you don't finish the list?" My brain broke, and I was like, "What do you mean, what if I don't finish the list?" She's like, "Right, but, like, what if we just take some of those items off the list that, like, aren't so important, or maybe more superficial things, and we just let those go?" And I'm like, "I'm sorry, you want me to not complete my task list?" She's like, "Yes, I do." And I was like, "I don't understand." And it was really hard for me to grasp that concept because I was putting way too much pressure on myself to do too much too fast all at once. And now I realize that that's a part of like the perfectionism side of things that I was using as a coping skill that was not serving me at all. And when I started whittling down that list, and I was like, okay, what are 3 things that I need to do to be productive in the next 90 days? And then that was too much still. So I was like, okay, what's one thing I can work on this month? And the second month, what's another thing I can add? So I'd pick my top 3, I'd space them out, 1-month habit, 2-month habit, 3-month habit. And by the time 90 days came on, I had either completed or started changing 3 different habits. And that was so much more reasonable for me than drowning in a 3-page single space. Like, these are my corrections and things I need.
Yeah, for sure. I was a
Also, we
little
are
more
our biggest critic. We are, aren't we?
yeah, for sure. I was a little more rebellious on the mindset, like how you said you were more of the victim mentality. I was more of the you can't tell me what I have to do in my life. And I don't care if you're right or wrong. I'm just gonna do it my way or else. And that was
Mhm.
like complete opposite. So I had an issue with rebellion my whole life. That's my self-awareness that I had to become aware of and say, look, you can't just do this on your own, and you can't just go do whatever you want, because sometimes you got to think about things, otherwise you're going to just land yourself into situation you don't really want to be in.
Or
So,
you keep relearning the same lessons
or you keep
and
doing the same lessons. Kind of like when you go to the same bars or the same playgrounds or the same whatever, and you see the same people talking about the same things, and there's never any new things in your life. So, I don't know. It's kind of the same thing that you have to kind of make yourself aware of. All of these things, in my mind.
And I think for me, it was one of the things that kept catching my attention was I found myself stuck in like a 6-month cycle where I was like, okay, it feels like every 3 months or I start recognizing something similar and then every 6 months like that manifests into my life and that every 6 months I kept finding myself in the same spot with the same mentality with the same frustrations and feeling like I had done a lot of different things to help myself grow. And I did do a lot of things, but what I was changing was things that were superficial emotions or superficial attempts, and it wasn't me being vulnerable and honest with myself to do the deep work that could have prevented those cycles from stopping or like could have helped those cycles stop. And so it was having to
Right.
remove myself from the situation when that 6 months came around and said, "Okay, how do I wanna show up? Why am I showing up the same way that I do every 6 months with the same frustrations? I feel like I've done so much change on myself, but really nothing's changed." And for me, that was the hardest pill to swallow. That reality was nothing had changed because I was still living the same problems every 6 months. Even though I had growth, it was good stuff that was changing, I was making a positive impact, but I wasn't deepening who I was as a person, it was just all superficial stuff, and having been like a codependent, very insecure person, part of that was my, like, need for overcompensation. "Look, I read this book. Look, I made this thing. Look, I shared this information with people. Look, 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 look," and it was that need for constant external validation, and so when every 6 months came around, I could be like, "Look, I have all these things to prove how much I've grown as a person." But really, it was just stuff to improve, like to show to other people that I was growing. But really, I was lying to myself and not being vulnerable and honest. And it wasn't until you and I became friends that you just called me out on my BS from day one. And we're like, "Yeah, but like, what about this?" Or, "Yeah, but like, how is that serving you? Change your mindset here." And I'll be like, I knew you were right, and so when you were talking about the rebellious behavior, it made me think it's a lot easier to accept accountability or changes from people that we respect, and a lot of times, people we don't respect or strangers or acquaintances will be like, "Hey, maybe you could change this," and, we might not respect their opinion or their views on stuff, and so we kinda, like, find a reason to negate it, but when somebody we respect points something out to us, we're just like, "Ah, shit, they're right, and I can't argue with that."
Yeah. You know,
And
I used
that's
to I used to
huge.
tell I used to tell parents sometimes that we're having troubles getting through to their kids. And I still tell this to some parents that need to hear it. Sometimes when you're trying to get through to your kids and you want them to hear a message you're trying to say to them, you often have to find somebody they respect
Mhm,
more to let them know that same information, to use that information to put into their minds because they listen and respect that other person while they're rebelling against their parents
mhm.
and the control of which the
Which is a
illusion of
natural
control of
state.
right, which is a natural state all children go through because I did. Every time my mom would be like, "Hey, this, that, or the other thing," I'd be like, "Yeah, whatever, mom. Okay, see you later." And then,
Yeah.
but when that same message came from somebody that I respected more, I was like, well, damn, you just made a great point, man. So it's kind of like, uh,
And I don't
I
think
don't know,
it's just with kids too. I think it's just with
adults
re
too, yeah,
with relationships that we're really, really familiar with. We know more about the person that we're familiar with, so when we hear them
sure.
say something, it's like, "Oh, yeah, I hear you." But when it comes from somebody else and sometimes we respect strangers more than we respect people that we know personally, you know?
That's true. I talked
And,
about that in the last episode.
Exactly. And so when somebody says something, it's just like it sits with you different because it's coming from an unfamiliar source. And so your brain has to process it because when it comes from a familiar source, sometimes we just filter it through the lens that we have with them and we don't always hear what they're trying to say. When it
It's
comes from an
just my
unfamiliar
friend.
source, right? When it comes
It's
from
just my
an
parent.
unfamiliar force, we have to process this new information from this new person. Like our brain doesn't have a lens for them. So we hear it a lot more directly.
Yeah.
Which I've known a lot of people in marriages to be like, "How come when I say it, they don't hear me, but when somebody else says it, it's the best idea ever?" And it's like, you know what? That's not just you. That's human nature.
Yeah, my early on shadow work, it's funny because when I look back, my shadow work really started
Can you define that
early.
before we haven't used that
So
word yet?
when we say go into the shadow, like I like to say go into the shadows, your shadow work. Your shadow work is the deepest, darkest stuff that you're hiding from yourself. The things you put off the most, the things that you hide in that closet that you don't want anybody else to ever figure out.
Or
The
run
things
from?
or run from. It's the things that you think about and do in solitude when nobody else is around and you think nobody's watching me, but then you're doing these things or thinking these things while you're alone. And it could be anything. I mean, your shadow work could be something that happened to you as a child. It could be something that happened to you recently and you buried it down because it was just that dark. And then you turned it into a personality trait. Like that overwhelmingly dark situation turned you into the person you are. And so what your job is to do is to go down there and shed light on it and say, "Hey, look, you've been tormenting me forever. This is not okay. It's not healthy. It's making me, not such a good person. So now you have to address it. Now you have to face it. And when you
Hmm.
face it, you're gonna learn a lot about yourself. You're gonna learn a lot of things that you forgot. You're going to have feelings that you thought weren't there anymore. You're going to just experience all these past memories that you've tried to run away from. And that's shadow work. And when you dig really into that and you really dig down deep, you're going to find the you're going to find out how much more of a person you are than what
You're
you
gonna
think you
discover
are.
you're gonna discover your depth, you
You're going
know?
to
And
discover, right?
that's
Rediscover
why
yourself.
and that's why when we are vulnerable with ourselves and we recognize a trait, like a personality trait or something that we're encouraged, like we are trying to encourage ourselves to change, you have to have self discipline to see it through. Because if you don't, you're going to face it and you're
You're
going
going to
to
run
sit
away.
there and you're not going to know what to do with it, you know? And I've utilized a lot of therapy to work through some of this stuff. I've listened to a lot of different talks on YouTube. I've had different life coaches or mentors. I've worked through my shadow work with a lot of external support for the stuff that was the hardest to process. Sometimes that was just friendships, but
Right.
I had to build like a support foundation for myself. And for me, when I was decided to go through the shadow work, it was very challenging. It was very overwhelming, but I committed to myself and I said, I'm going to do this no matter what. And I'm going to be disciplined in seeing this through. And there was multiple times that felt so defeated when I would be working through some of this stuff because I was not anticipating the physical manifestations that would surface from some of the stuff that was buried deep down. I know that you have experienced this with me multiple times where I've had different physical ailments kind of come up out of nowhere and would all of a sudden feel like in either a state of an emergency and then ended up not being, or other situations that I would have like stress rashes that would surface while I was really when I was resisting the change and I was trying to control the the shadows and the struggles and the things that I was trying to grow from, and I was like, I want to have control over
You
this.
were running from them.
I was running from it and trying to control it, but trying to grow all at the same time. And I just broke out in stress rashes. And I was
Yeah,
just like, I can't
overwhelmed.
believe that this is happening. But I told myself, I'm like, well, this is a cortisol response. Like, what's happening right now that's causing me to be so stressed? And I just remember you telling me at one point, like, well, you're not really surrendering to the process. And I remember breaking down in my living room and just sobbing my eyes out with overwhelm. And I told myself, well, I can either keep doing this and live in this state of high stress and anxiety, or just surrender to it, love myself, be vulnerable enough to feel what I'm feeling, and love the past version of me. That I know I said this in a past episode, where you go back and you grab the hand of that little girl, or for me, and you bring her forward and you love her and you show her you're not there anymore. You're not living in your past. That whatever you had to do to keep yourself safe, or you know comfortable at that state, no longer serves you in this life. So yes, that's been something you've been doing as a personality trait for 20 years, but you don't have to do that anymore. And giving myself permission to let those things go. But every time, those overwhelming emotions came up, or those physical ailments would come up, I would just want to, I would be tempted to be like, why is this happening to me? What is going on? But I had the self awareness to be like, this is part of the healing process. And as soon as I could recognize that, I knew what to do with it. And I was able to fix the
Create
situation,
disciplines.
to spin a positive thing on it. I mean, for not to be too personal, but there was one thing with a certain part of my body that had an ailment, and I was really, really struggling with that. And I was wanting to just scream and cry and, possibly elect to have surgery to fix what was going on. And I just remembered, I said, or I could learn to put health into my body, learn to love this part of my body, and learn to support it in the way that it needs to, both internally and externally. And within, I think it was like 8 weeks, I basically resolved and rewired the situation fully, where that part of my body was no longer experiencing that ailment. And that was so empowering to me, to be able to see that I could do that when it felt like such a big deal in the moment.
It's always in the moment the big deal, but once the moment passes, it becomes just a memory, which is kind of
Mhm.
cool.
And then we
But
get to
that's why,
choose,
yeah,
how much control that memory has in our life.
right. You can either bury it and let it come surface later in life, or you can deal with it right in the moment and let it go down the river. And that's why discipline is very important, because discipline creates those things like positive self-talk. If you discipline yourself enough to every single day, my discipline is to speak to myself in a positive way. There's a discipline. That's a
Mhm.
discipline. That's what you need to do, because then your subconscious will reprogram itself and say, "Wow, I'm a great person." And then you're going to feel more confident about yourself. And then you're not going to look at what other people are saying. You're not going to see the whole world looking at you. You're going to see you looking at you and bringing it out to the world. And
Now,
and it
Joshua,
changes. But I don't want to go to, yeah.
positive self-talk though can be a really big hurdle for some people to start, because they don't believe it. So what would
Well,
you say to
I'm
somebody?
just giving one example.
No, I know, but it's a really good example, because our thoughts, like we talked about in our first episode, our thoughts, become
Create
action.
vibration,
Exactly.
and
And
then they
so
create.
what would you say to somebody who struggles with positive self-talk, in helping them reframe that or start that habit? When
Um,
especially when they don't
yeah,
feel it, especially when they're not feeling it.
yeah, that's something that I struggled with um a lot when I was in my beginning phases. Like I really did. I struggled with positive towards myself because of my background, and I didn't have a lot of positive experiences in my young life to make me confident. So I had this struggle, deep struggle with confidence and courage, and even self-talk falls into that category. I
Mhm.
always talked bad about myself. Oh, I'm not worth this. I'm not worth that. But the The beginning point is making that first comment. Like,
Mhm. I would even
you
say
will
maybe doing
never,
it in the mirror.
yeah, look yourself in the mirror and tell yourself you're a wonderful person. It doesn't matter if you believe it or not at that moment, because eventually, the more you do it, like anything, the more energy you give to it, the more you're going to get out of it.
Mhm.
So once you say it the one time, you're going to have maybe a little spark.
Mhm.
Maybe not even a spark, maybe just a little puff of smoke or something, and then you're going to do it again the next day and you're going to look at yourself and you're going to say, "Man, just a wonderful person. I'm just happy
Mhm.
today. I'm feeling great." Even if you're feeling sad, just do it. Because I do that and it works. Like if I'm having a bummed out day or some negative energy is coming my way, I'll look at myself and I'll say these things. And then sometimes it even takes a friend to step in so that you can release that energy and then they can give you good positive feedback, which will then give you more positive energy because it's
Mhm.
just doubled now. And I would say, start with just the one word. Look yourself in the mirror and start with one word, because that's where it's going to start.
You know,
Anyways,
as a couple of things based on what you said was something that you taught me is that comedy, it can be the cure for everything, you
comedy
know?
too. Yeah,
If
comedy.
you can get
It's a
yourself
good
to
one.
start laughing. And so what I've done to support myself during difficult days is if I know I'm having something that I'm struggling with and I have a lot of pent up energy and I don't know how to move past it, I'll just put on like a 10-minute or an hour long YouTube in my earplugs and just listen to that. And before I know it, I'm laughing and I forget that I was even upset, you know? Or I remember it, but I'm not like attached to the feeling anymore and I let it pass. But another thing with the self talk, like positive self talk and reframing yourself, is utilizing your senses in that as much as possible. You know, as a chiropractor, so many people, one thing we learned in school is like are isolated or alone or live by themselves and they don't get enough physical touch in their life to feel comfortable within their own skin or with other people.
Yeah.
That's not the case for everybody because you got those people who come up and hug anybody and be like, they're just real huggers. And I love those people, but you know who they are in your life. And they're, we all need to have that physical touch. And so what I had to start learning to do for myself was finding different ways when I'm struggling with something to incorporate as many senses as possible into that positive self talk. So, whether that would be placing my hand on my forehead or on my right shoulder, like placing my hand on my right shoulder and kind of giving myself a hug, and then taking a deep breath and feeling that, like that breath, and bringing ourselves aware to the breath. One of my favorite things to do is place my one hand on top of my head and the other one on my stomach and to like tell myself the positive thing in my head and my hands touching my head. So it's like bringing my body aware to my mind even more. And then putting my other hand on my stomach. And so as I take a deep breath in, I imagine that positive thought going from one hand to the other hand and then back up again. And doing that helps my body kind of reset. It also brings you out of sympathetic fight or flight and kind of into more of a relaxation state as well. And it might take me a couple of times to do it. And when I do, though, I notice such a difference in how my body resonates with that and accepts it more than if I just like, it's going to be a good day. It's going to be a good day. It's going to be a good day, because I'm still
Right.
in a state of angst and I'm not breathing. So incorporating
Sure.
that breath with the positive self talk. And if you want to, put your hand on your head or give yourself a hug or whatever during that, it makes a difference because it resonates with your body in a different way. You're utilizing more of your senses and it's going to incorporate even deeper.
Another great discipline, that one that I'm picking up from you more often, is grounding. I I have been enjoying myself with some grounding. I am one of those people, now everybody understand. I don't take my shoes off and walk anywhere without shoes.
I take my shoes off before I even leave the house.
Yeah, so I'm starting to get used to that. I think that's actually helping me a lot. It actually does feel good, and you do feel it. you feel the Earth's energy and you realign with, because we are humans and we are of this Earth. And when you make that electrical connection, it does resonate in you and brings you, uh, closer to that
Well,
energy.
and not only that, but when we have free radicals in our body, which are like the toxins that are floating around our body hectically trying to bind to whatever they can,
Mm.
when you go outside and you ground yourself, whether it's your bare feet or if you don't want to take your shoes off, just sitting on, the sidewalk and putting your hands in the grass or in the dirt,
And some
anywhere,
water.
just running, putting your hands in the cold water, even in your sink, you can put your hands under cold water in your sink, and that will ground you because it's negative ions that will actually help pull those free radicals out of your body. So the longer you do it, the better it is for you. And you're actually working on cleansing your body from toxins, the more you're in touch with nature. And the more you can get like skin on ground contact or skin on nature contact, the better it is for you in cleansing your body and your mind. And it does. And when we don't have those free radicals, your brain and your gut are so connected. And so if you're pulling those free radicals out of your system, your gut's not processing them. It's not affecting your brain connection, and you're thinking clearer, you have less anxiety, you're breathing with more ease, you're breathing deeper, all those positive things, because free radicals will just wreak havoc if they are given the chance.
And another
So,
emphasis on the nature. So I was looking at this peer-reviewed study that they did, a 30-year study of plants. And they said that plants, not only do they talk to each other, they send signals. So the plants can tell when humans are standing next to them. They can record and save memories of you speaking to them positively or negatively. They can also um, just like they store memory, like plants store memory, and that was fascinating to me. And I was just like, what the heck is this? Because I've never been taught that before. I never heard that before until I seen that study, and I'm learning more about it because I just recently seen it like 2 days ago or something. But
well, it's true
it's
because when like
pretty
people
interesting.
who have green thumbs and have really flourishing gardens, it's because when they go out to the garden, they have a very positive mindset. They love it, they enjoy
They
it, they're
talk to it and they
grounding, they're
speak to
talking
them.
to it. When I go out and garden, I'm like, this mother effing plant better get in the ground. And I don't understand why it's not staying alive, and it stresses me out because it is something I'm trying to create a discipline in. Okay, we're going to do this, we're going to enjoy this, we're going to grow our own food that's going to nourish our bodies and all these things, like, and I have to have positive self-talk on amping myself up for gardening. So that's why I don't have successful plants in my life. Other people, it's because they love doing it and the plants can feel it. Also with water, petri dishes, like if you have a petri dish where it's water and you talk to it, it'll be, crystal clear in a positive way. But if you talk negative to it, it'll grow bacteria and all sorts of other things. And you're
I
like,
love
oh,
that experiment.
what
Oh,
scummy water is this? And it's like, well, you
yeah.
talk dirty to it. LOL.
Yeah, I love when they did that experiment, and I like the snowflake one too. Like when they project the emotions into the water, drop, and then turn it into a snowflake. I think that one's
Mm-hmm.
pretty amazing too.
But to bring it back around, we're not just talking about talking to plants and having them grow or die or, scummy
Right.
water versus clear water. Now, think about the impact that that has if you talk to an inanimate object outside of your body or even a living object. I guess plants are living, but something outside of your body, and you talk to it and has that much of an impact outside of your body. Imagine what happens when you talk to yourself in a negative talk kind of way. The
Or
anxiety,
positive.
or well, I was gonna get there, yeah, but like,
Yeah.
the distress, all that kind of stuff, that telling yourself, oh, I'm never gonna get over this, or this pain will always be here. Well, your body hears that, so it's like, all right, we're in it to win it until the day we die. But if you talk positively to yourself, then you notice things changing and healing and growing and adapting and
Yeah.
strengthening. I know both of us are committed to working out and improving our bodies through exercise.
I love
And
exercise.
it's such a healthy thing because not only does it give you an outlet, but it also builds confidence the longer you stick with it. But the other thing I found when I first started my, my fitness journey, I guess, was I didn't believe that I was going to reach the goals that I was going to make. So I started telling myself, I am getting fit by the day. Even if I didn't work out that day, it's like, remember, girl, you're getting fit even when you're not trying. And, some of the days that I just said that and didn't work out had surprising results. LOL.
Yeah. No, it's
But it's true. And the more I told myself, I'm getting fit, I'm doing this, I'm seeing these results, even when I couldn't really see them and I could feel that they were coming.
well, they were coming. They were reprogramming your subconscious. So and that was
Exactly.
given that it was giving the chemical feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So
A-
it
And
was
so if you
so it's
have a
partly
goal that you're trying to have a discipline in while you're going out of the fear spectrum into the love spectrum, and especially if it's something that you want to feel very defeated over, having that self-discipline, positive talk, finding a good support system, having the encouragement that you need. And sometimes a good support system means getting quiet to a majority of the people in your life and just picking one or two people as close confidants to help you in your growth journey. And sometimes it's a person that you pay like a therapist, and other times it's a person that's a best friend or, a new person that's come into your life who just gets it and is also in the same phase of life and wants to grow, and you become accountability buddies. And it surprises you who ends up being those people in your life sometimes, because it's usually never the people we think it's going to be. And and as you grow, you're going to find new people, different people, all that kind of stuff, and you're going to be changing and growing to the positive, and hopefully inspiring the people around you to grow too, but in a way that just is, your actions speak for themselves and you don't have to boast about it. Because that, for me, I was spending a lot of my time overcompensating, trying to get external validation. And when I cut that out, it was actually so much more fulfilling when I was just satisfied about my results for myself and not feeling the need to prove it to anyone.
right. I like see a little bit of the opposite too. I'm more of and this may resonate with some of you, work in silence type.
Hmm.
So I like to work on myself with myself inside myself. That's kind of my thing, but I do need help sometimes. I am still human. But but for me and for that side of things, like having a good support system is fantastic, but I truly believe, like, even though you have a support system, even though you have these people encouraging
You still have to want it more for
you
yourself.
have to want it more for yourself, and nobody's going to
Hmm.
change it except for you. And the only way for
Right.
you to change it is for you to sit down with yourself and say, look, me, this is
Yep.
it. We're doing it, or I'm kicking you in the medulla. You know, you
Yeah,
got
for
to do
sure.
it. You got to do it.
It's
So,
true. I definitely agree 100%. When I said a good support system, at first you might feel like you need them. I know we talked about this in past
and that's
episodes,
great though. And
but over
sometimes you
time,
do.
right. But over time you gain that confidence that you can start, doing it. You cut that tie a little bit and you're like, okay, I can do this on my own. I know you're there if I need you, but really I've gained so much confidence in myself that I'm able to do this and just come to you when needed. But being able to do it for yourself is such a huge thing, because we're all meant to be secure, independent, healthy, living our life to the fullest individuals. However, the world bombards us a lot of times with this constant need to connect and to avoid our problems, that we stay very codependent in a society with other people, and do those superficial changes like I did, for years, where I was just like, well, these were superficial changes I made, things I can talk about, but it wasn't the deep inner work. And when I found the deep inner work, I found it to be much more fulfilling and rewarding than
And a lot
anything
harder.
else. It was so hard. It was so hard. And I'm still doing it. I'm still
Yeah,
learning
I'm still
and
doing it too.
changing. And it's never going to end. It's never going to end, because I'm going to constantly be new versions of myself. And as you raise your personal vibration, as gain more confidence and grow as an individual, there's always going to be that, like, middle school to high school moment where you feel like you're on top of the world and then you
Oh
realize
yeah.
you're going to go into the next tier of your Maslow's triangle, a hierarchy of needs, and then you're back at the bottom and you got a lot to learn again. But I
Yeah.
was recently talking to somebody today and they're like, I love that spot though, where you get to just soak up all the information and learn new things about yourself and see the world in a different way and keep growing and keep becoming engaged in a better, more fulfilling way. And it's like, absolutely. And I'm a
Yeah.
big nerd, so I love learning.
Yeah. I I love absorbing knowledge too in different ways. I'm more of a listening, visual type, you
It's
know.
okay. There's more than one type of nerd. You can say you're a nerd too.
Yeah, I'm totally a nerd. I literally sit and listen to uh physics lectures that are like 3 hours long, and I will sit and listen to the whole damn thing and write stuff down and take notes, and I love that stuff. I love it all.
Which is great because you're
Physiology,
using more of
biology.
your senses to absorb the information.
Yes.
So, with today's episode, I really think for me, I want to give a good takeaway for people is that it's going to be a commitment and a dedication to yourself to be able to want to consistently grow. It is going to be exhausting, but it's going to be so rewarding. There is definitely, and that's one thing I should definitely note to people is that when you start rewiring your brain, even if it's something simple as I'm stopping negative talk and I'm changing to positive talk, that is using mental energy that you're not used to outputting, and you will be fatigued. You will be exhausted. There's sometimes where I'm listening to a YouTube or talking with a friend and having like a personal development conversation, and I have to like go take a nap afterwards because I'm like, oh, that was a lot of information to absorb and I want that to sink in because I'm just so fatigued from the mental energy of it all. And so, it's going to everybody's growth is going to look different, how their body responds to it, how, like I said, I had anything from being tired and needing a nap to having big physical ailments show up in my life that I had to keep positive and stay dedicated and disciplined and be like, this is part of my growth. This is trying to teach me something. This is something that I'm needing to address and it's trying to get my attention, and what is it that I'm avoiding, and being honest with myself. And sometimes being honest with myself was having that victim script, oh, I know that this is a problem because this thing that happened this one time, blah, 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 blah. And stopping that victim script and saying, I'm actually going to forgive myself in this situation, forgive anybody involved in this situation, and release this and let my body have the permission to heal and move forward in life. So it was the same content, but my view on it was different. And that was the thing where I was like, I am honest with myself. I am aware of this thing, but I wasn't letting myself really be honest in wanting to let it go because I held on to it so long because it was part of my identity. And so I was afraid of who I would be if I didn't have all these fucked up identities. And I turns out I was a much better version of myself, but that was something I had to grieve too, was I was no longer being this older version of myself. I was being a newer version of myself that was healthier, that was more understanding of my needs, that was more dedicated, that had more self-discipline, and talk to myself in a positive way. And so I know recognizing that just because you might be aware doesn't mean you're being honest with yourself, and really letting yourself be honest with yourself and letting things go and releasing them and letting that part of your identity have a better personality trait develop from it is so rewarding, but it might be some of the toughest work you're ever going to do.
Yeah, I love that you talked about the honesty thing. Honesty is, I feel, is very difficult for a lot of people, including
Mhm.
myself. When I was in the beginning, it was very hard to be honest with myself because I didn't want to accept the real truth. But yeah, I like that. That's pretty cool.
Mhm.
Um,
'Cause, I mean, that was one thing that you saw in me over and over. I was like, I could tell
yeah,
you
for sure.
till the cows came home what was the problem, but I wasn't being honest with myself and how I wanted it to change.
Right.
So, and
Yeah,
and it's okay. It's okay to feel defeated, but you gotta keep going, you know?
absolutely. And I
Just
now I would leave with you know, I'm gonna go kind of a different tone here, where I'm gonna say that it's gonna get dark. You're gonna fall into a lot of dark spots when you go into shadow work and you start learning discipline of a new life, healthier lifestyles. Because in order to get to that like healthy lifestyle, you have to conquer that shadow. Otherwise, you're just gonna keep lying to yourself and not be honest and you're gonna keep running away and hiding because there's these things lurking behind you that are holding you back. So when you do face them, it's gonna take you to a dark place, and you just got to remember that you are born of light, and you're going to shine brighter than any darkness that can hold you down. And to go into that born of light thing, that's actually scientifically proven too. If anybody wants to peer review that.
which we could definitely talk about in a
We'll talk
future
about it.
episode as
Yeah,
well. But I was going to comment that I love that analogy or that advice, because the analogy that I thought of was it's like a little kid, because a lot of our wounds come from our childhood, right? And then the habits build off of them. And so it's like that little kid who's like, there's a monster under my bed. My parents just closed the door and there's nobody else in here but me. And it's dark. And I think there's a monster under my bed. And that monster is alive as long as we believe it
believe
to
it
be
to be.
alive. And when we look under the bed, we're like, okay, there's no monster. And then we try to fall asleep, but then I was like, but it could be there now. And and we keep checking it. It's almost like you have to go under your bed and you have to sit there and you have to be like,
You got to
I'm
make
just
friends with the
going to
dark.
stay here. I'm going to stay here until I can prove to myself that the monster is just inside my head. And then over time you can sleep on top of your bed. And if a monster comes, you're like, okay, well, I know how to deal with you because I've already slept under there. So
You're
enjoy
my
that.
pal now.
Yeah. It's like enjoy sleeping on the concrete, friend.
Right?
Uh
As you're dragging him behind you by his foot. Yeah, you're coming with me now, Betty.
who's the
we're
monster now?
we're
But even
friends now.
but even Jordan Peterson says, and those of you who don't know who Peterson is, because I find that there are people who don't know who Jordan Peterson is. He's an amazing, I think he's a psychologist, and he talks about personal development and growth and the brain and all that kind of stuff. He's wonderful. Check him out. But there's a talk that he has about, you know, don't fear the monster, become the monster. You have to embrace these sides of us that we fear so much and learn to deal with them and to bring them to surface and conquer them so we can have this encouragement in our lives that, even our own deepest, darkest monsters can't, hold us back. And that brings so much confidence and positivity and good, healthy mental rewiring. That might not be exactly what he said, but that's what I took from it. So yeah, I love that point that you take. And as a reminder, exercising, it's always good, even if it's something new, something small, 5 minutes, and doing breath work every day, just taking a couple of minutes to deep breathe, some positivity into your body is going to be so healing. And you might not feel it at first, but do it long enough, have that discipline, and you will start feeling the results in not only how you see yourself, but how you present yourself to the world. And you might be surprised at how much you like that version.
Absolutely.
So, until next time, I can't wait for episode 5, because each time we do this, we get another episode to share with people, and it just really brings me with joy. So, looking forward to episode 5. Stay tuned, and we will catch you on the flip side.